Hello Congress students, I am here to show you some of our sewing tools and use some of our sewing terms to make sure that you're aware of what they are. We're going to start with this flexible tape measure. This flexible tape measure is used to measure parts of our body that we need to know how big they are so we can make the proper clothing. So for example, when we are going ahead and making pajama pants at school, I need to know how big everyone's waist is so that we can make pajama pants that are going to fit their waist. So what we would do is we would take this tape measure and we would go ahead and wrap it around the part that we needed to know. So for example, if I wanted to know my wrist size for like the sleeve of a shirt, then I could go ahead and I can measure my wrist size. I would always have to start at the 0 part and then see where it lands. So that would be about a 7-inch for my wrist. Okay, so this is going to be used to measure parts of our body, our neck, our waist, the length of our legs, things like that, so that we can make sure that we are measuring correctly and then having clothes that fit. This is a yardstick. It is going to be used to measure the fabric that we need, how long of the fabric is. So each of our patterns will say that you need 1 yard or 2 yards or 3 yards of fabric, and this yardstick will be able to go ahead and count off that much fabric and measure it out for us. This is a seam gauge. This seam gauge is going to be used to measure small sections of cloth. So for example, if I were to go ahead and want to measure this and make a 1/2 inch seam, I would go ahead, take this, move it down to the 1/2 inch section, then I would go ahead and fold it down, fold this up, and then I would know that this was going to be a 1/2 inch. So I could go ahead and iron it here, or I could pin it here, so I could go ahead and keep it at a 1/2 inch. So that is a seam gauge. It is used often to make seams with our clothes, and we will definitely be using it to make masks this year at school with our machine sewing. Let's look next at our cutting equipment. So there are several different types of scissors that you could have. So these are fabric shears. These are regular scissors, and these are small scissors. The small scissors are going to be used to cut tiny pieces of thread. It is used to clean up a project when we are finished with it. And these are regular scissors. These scissors will be used to cut paper, not to cut fabric. These fabric shears are going to be used to cut fabric. We only use fabric shears on fabric, because if we use it on paper, then it will dull them, and then our fabric will not have a nice, clean, crisp cut. It will have a jaggedy, ragged cut, and we don't want that. That doesn't look very nice. So these are some of our cutting tools. Another cutting tool that we will be using is this seam gate or seam ripper. Our seam ripper is going to be used for exactly what it sounds like, to rip out a seam. So I'm going to show you a seam real quick. This is a seam. We've got a back stitch, it comes down, and we've got another back stitch. That black line is our seam. In order to use our seam ripper, we're going to go ahead and take our seam ripper, we're going to slide it under the thread, and then we're going to go ahead and push it all the way through, because the cutting part is right down here. So when we go ahead and push that through, it rips out the seam. So here I'm going to go ahead and do that again. And then I can go ahead and pull this, and that thread comes right on out. And then you can see that we've taken out part of the seam with our seam ripper. Okay, so another thing that we might be using in class is called tailor's chalk. This is going to be what's going to mark our fabric so that we can make sure that we have the line that we need. So if I were to pull this out and I want to go ahead and make a line right here, then I could go ahead and make a line just like that, and you can see that I have a line there, and then I would have something to cut on. The tailor's chalk is going to wash out of our fabric, so if I were to go ahead and mark on the right side of our fabric, the side that you would want to see, then that would go ahead and wash out. So that's going to be our tailor's chalk. Something that is a bit more permanent would be fabric markers. It's going to be just like regular markers, but they're going to be permanent and they're going to mark on the fabric. So we are going to be talking about some safety pins and some straight pins and a pin cushion. This is a pin cushion that we would have at school. You can see these are straight pins. That one wasn't very straight. So these straight pins go ahead and are in our pin cushion, and then we use them to connect two pieces of fabric together. So for example, here I have two pieces of felt. In order to go ahead and to put them together and hold them until I can sew them, I'm going to go ahead and poke down into one, and then I'm going to go ahead and push it right back up, and it'll come right back through the top. Okay, one more time, I'm going to go down and then up, and so it'll hold two pieces of fabric together and in place. So each time that you are using a straight pin, it should go down into the fabric and right back up and out so that we can see all of the points on the same end. That's what the back side looks like. So those are all straight pins. A safety pin is going to be something that is going to be smaller. So it's going to look like this. It has an open and closed area, so when we press on it, it just goes down and we can slide it in. And this is going to be to hold different things. We often use safety pins to use something very temporary. So for example, when we are putting our elastic into our pants of our pajama pants, then we go ahead and we often go ahead and put our safety pin on our elastic, and then we go ahead and pull it through because we can find it in there. And then once we are done and it has gone all the way through, then we go ahead and we take the safety pin out. So we will not be using our safety pins very often. They came in the case, but we're not going to be using them very often. So we also are going to have some hand sewing needles and a needle threader. I'm going to show you those real quick and show you the difference between our sewing needles. I'm going to set this cloth down so you can see. So here I have a machine sewing needle. Down here at the very bottom is where the hole is for your needle, right down here, right next to the point. For a hand sewing needle, the point, let's try that again. The point is right down here, and then the hole is up here at the top of the needle. Okay, so our hand sewing needle has the hole at one end and the point at the other, where our machine sewing needle has the point at the bottom and then the hole right above it. So let's go ahead and look at your case a little bit. These are the things that have come in your case. So we've already talked about your flexible tape measure. This one is just made out of paper instead of this one is more out of plastic. They both will work though, so it would be just fine if we were needing it to sew with. You have lots of small spools of thread in here. A spool of thread just holds the thread until you can go ahead and use it on your project. So we've got lots of different spools of thread. We also have a thimble. Your thimble is most of the time used on your middle finger, and it is just used to go ahead and push your needle through. So here's my needle. I'm going to go ahead and just push it through, and to bring it back out the other side. So here, be like this. Then I could go ahead and pull it from this side. It is a skill that you will use and you will get better at the more you use. So you're going to have a thimble in there. This is a needle threader, and I'm going to show you that here in just a second. These are your small scissors. You can see these are very small. I told you that they're only for cutting thread, so we don't want to use them on your felt project. They won't hold up for that. In here, you are going to find, first of all, you should only open your case on one side, not on both sides, so that we can go ahead and use that as a hinge on the other side. So you can remove the tape on one side, but not on both. You have all of your little safety pins. You have your straight pins. Notice that these straight pins do not have the big round circle at the end, which means that they will be harder to find on your carpet. So I don't like them as much, but I want you to be careful. If you drop them on your carpet, make sure that you will get them picked up right away, because this does not feel good if it goes into your foot. In here we also have several buttons. They're all 4-hole buttons. Buttons come in 4-hole, 2-hole, and 1-hole. And all of ours are in here are going to be 4-hole. Okay, so let's take a quick look at your needle threader. So when I have some thread that needs to go into the end of my needle, this is going to be for hand sewing. What I'm going to do to use my needle threader, I'm going to have my needle. I'm going to go ahead and take this tiny end, and I'm going to go ahead and slide it through my needle, through the point of my needle. Okay, so at this point, the needle threader is poked all the way through. I'm going to take my thread, I'm going to put it through the end of my needle threader, which is a pretty big hole, especially in comparison to my needle. I'm going to pull it through just a little bit to have a little bit of space there. I want to be able to make sure I can definitely get both sides of that thread down. And then I'm just going to go ahead and pull back on this. So I'm going to pull it through, and that's going to thread my needle for me. Now, if you have had Fax with me before, we've never used needle threaders. I have not purchased them for you. So this might be an easier way to go ahead and do that. If you don't do it this way and you want to go ahead and do it the same way that we have always done it, I tell you to go ahead and clip off the end of your thread so that it is nice and smooth. Yes, those scissors are not going to work very well. So I'm going to go ahead and clip that off, and then I'm going to go ahead and take this and I'm going to try and slide it through the end of my needle. Sometimes, like this time, I got it right away. Sometimes it takes me a while to get it through. We're never going to go ahead and put a knot at the top near our needle. We're going to go ahead and stretch it through. This is like going to be one whole length of thread. We're going to go ahead and cut that off. And then real quick, I will show you how to go ahead and tie your knot. So we're going to take both ends of our thread. Our needle, as you can see, is clear down at the other end. This end that has the 2 pieces of thread, we're going to go ahead and wrap it around our fingernail. And then we're just going to roll it off the end of our finger. See here, all of these little round places where it has gone ahead and curled in on itself. We want that. I'm going to take my middle finger, I'm going to put it right over it, and then I'm going to pull. And this is going to leave us with one big ugly knot. That's what I want. And the reason why I want that is because when I start to sew, I want the knot to be on the back. So I'm going to go ahead and make a stitch here. I'm going to pull this all the way through. And then I'm going to go ahead. That knot on the back is going to hold it secure. I'm going to go ahead and go down and then right back up. This is just a quick running stitch, and I'm going to show you a video for this later. But as you're pulling it, that knot is going to be what's going to keep it on the other side. So this is going to be the back side. This would be the front side. And we would go ahead and make sure that that was in a nice straight line. If we were doing this and we messed up, we can easily just pull at the end of that, cut off the knot, and then when we pull on our thread, it'll just come all the way through. Okay, so that's enough for today. You've gone through most of your sewing terms. From here, we will go ahead and talk more later. So I will talk to you soon. Bye.